Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Colorado Rockies. We are in the early stages after taking over this team less than a month ago. Have done a little bit so far, mainly trading away talent to free up some money to bolster our free agent budget and to also improve our scouting and development budgets. We've also really rebuilt our entire coaching staff throughout the organization, which I really like right now. Taking a look at our staff roles, we've got excellent teachers among our base coaches and our bench coach. Got pretty good cohesion that's going to continue getting better in the locker room. Several people that work well together and not a lot of conflicts in the personalities. And we've just really increased the talent of our coaching staff. Ended up retaining only our hitting coach and our first base coach from the previous regime. Particularly excited about our new scouting director, Alex Delgado, who's a highly favored tools scout and excellent or outstanding at everything. As I mentioned, we have traded away some of our higher priced talent to clear up some money. In retrospect, we traded away two Silver Slugger winners at third base and DH. The DH was scheduled to make about $13 million this coming year and then over $20 million next year in his final year of arbitration, and he didn't have the best personality in the world, so we were glad to move on from him. And the third baseman was going to be making about $7 million this year and then $11 million each of the 2 years after that. Obviously, as I noted, he earned a Silver Slugger this year. I think a lot of that had to do with playing in Colorado. Was going to be in his early 30s, and $11 million a year seemed a bit overpriced, not just fully priced to me. And as I said, we really wanted to bolster our scouting and development budgets, so we made some difficult decisions in return in those trades and some of the other ones that we made. We reunited with Juan Bin Daoud, who was a former draft pick of ours in Pittsburgh, a respectable major league pitcher. And then on the lineup side, we made a trade for Victor Gonzalez, starting catcher. We've got Tampa Bay to retain a big chunk of his contract, but he's a solid defensive catcher, and he's got excellent home run power. We think our scouting accuracy, as you'll see if you look closely on most of our team, is pretty mediocre. So we're working on scouting up everybody and also scouting the free agents since we don't know a ton about them. But we do think that Gonzalez could be a big contributor at catcher. That's also an area that our ownership wants us to improve. And given that ownership put me on watch in our entrance interview on our first day on the job, that I could be fired after this season if it's not a successful one, I felt like I kind of needed to do something to make them happy, given that one of their goals is for us to play 500 ball next year. And after taking a lot of talent off of a 75 and 87 win team, I don't know that that's actually going to happen. The other guy that we added was Victor Merakin, a respectable utility infielder, I think, relatively young, going to be 25 soon. Could end up playing a starting role at second base or shortstop for us next year, but in a perfect world, I think he's just a good, solid player to have on a team who's pretty versatile defensively and can handle a bat reasonably adeptly. And as I mentioned, with a brand new scout on board in an organization that right now still isn't investing a ton in scouting. The budget last year was around $8 million. That's still the applicable budget. We're going to double it to about $16 million. But the situation we have here as free agency begins is that we don't know a lot about any of the players. So I am probably going to revert to one of my old MOs and be looking to players that I know somewhat well from the Pittsburgh Pirates as potential additions. And looking right here at free agency, you can see Henry Gonzalez, who we picked number one overall in our first draft with the Pirates back in 2038. He's become more of a fourth outfielder over the years. You can see we traded him from Pittsburgh to Toronto a year ago, and he didn't have a great year, hitting 220 with 14 home runs. You know, could be a respectable fourth or fifth outfielder for us, though. And then if you watched our Pirates episodes that just concluded, Yoshitaro Nakahara, the wrecked physically reclamation project from Japan, who had a monster year for us in his first year in Pittsburgh with 28 homers and 360 at-bats, and then struggled mightily with 5 home runs and 185 at-bats in the regular season last year, hitting just a .173 with 3 stints on the IL. I am still tempted by this great power against right-handed pitchers, particularly in Colorado. So we'll see whether or not I pursue either of those players. We'll see whether or not I pursue trades with Pittsburgh for some players that I know really well, but probably not going to make a huge splash in free agency until I've scouted some of the top players better. You may remember from our last episode that the previous GM on the first day of the offseason did make 2 offers to starting pitchers, Izzy Huerta and Mike Madrigal. I didn't like either of those contracts. I'm hoping that when we finally do get a response from the players on those, that they're looking for more money, or they reject them, or they go somewhere else. Because that would free up a little more money and give me a little more flexibility. But the contracts weren't so horrible that I didn't want to retract on them and kind of damage my reputation with free agents and players to be and agents around the league. You can see I've also made a number of minor league contract offers. Going to continue doing that. We lost a lot of minor league free agents this year, intentionally, because I didn't like the personalities of a lot of players. But you can see right now we've got 5 guys in AAA, 18 in AA, 19 in high A ball, even only 22 in single A. So we'll obviously be promoting some people from our 2 DSL teams and our ACL team and moving guys from the international complex into those teams. But we're still going to need to add some minor league talent through the free agent market. Unlikely that we're going to find big-time prospects. The big goal is just to find guys with good personalities to help mentor the real prospects along. And then at the AAA team to probably find some guys who are veterans when we get to March, who are still looking for a job, who could potentially be contributors for us on the 26-man major league roster if we have injuries, or if we just don't improve a lot during free agency. I think we're going to have the opportunity to add some players who can certainly competing for spots on the 26-man roster, even if we acquire them as minor league free agents. So although I think I kind of know what we have out there in Nakahara and Gonzalez, I don't think there's going to be crazy demand for either of those players. So probably going to wait till we get our scouting reports back before deciding what, if anything, to do with those guys. Thinking about free agency, kind of there's a ton of needs on this team, but the ones that are the most acute in terms of not having a body to fill the role and or being able to potentially make significant improvement, I would say are adding another outfielder, adding someone capable of being a starting shortstop, adding at least one left-handed arm in the bullpen, and potentially adding a starting pitcher. Those are kind of the 4 goals I have as we begin free agency. So going to search the trade market, like I said, for players from Pittsburgh that I know reasonably well who may be able to fill 1 or 2 of those needs. The other thing that we're going to need to think about is that we've got the Rule 5 draft coming up in a little over a month. Doing a ton of scouting right now on the free agents, as I noted, and then I'm also actually trying to have our scout focus on our own organization, where I think some of these assessments are way off. And with these 4.5, 5-star minor leaguers, I think it's our former scout who was a favorability scout and not as proficient as our current scout, having some outdated information. So trying to scout free agents, trying to scout our system, trying to scout the major and minor leagues in general just to get to know the universe better, but also going to try to do some targeted scouting ahead of the Rule 5 draft to hopefully have a sense of some of the top players who might be going through that, since that is certainly an area for a team with a losing record that's been cutting talent and doesn't have a huge budget. That's certainly an area where we could probably add a player or two who could make our 26-man roster in the spring also. And we do have a prospective deal together with Pittsburgh for Juan Castillo. Plays second, plays third. Not an ideal shortstop, but you can put him out there. Guy who is profiled as an above-average hitter. He had a great first year in Pittsburgh after picked him up in that big trade with the Dodgers for Isaiah Hill. He's regressed the last couple years, but he is a competent major league player. And I think he could probably put up some decent numbers in Colorado. And as I mentioned, also help stabilize our infield defense a little bit. Now, it's going to be interesting is we talked about in the first 2 episodes of this series. I tend to like to build my teams around pitching. And doing that in Colorado is going to be interesting. And I also do wonder, with the balls flying so crazily in Colorado, whether maybe infield defense in particular is not quite as important as it might be in other places like Kansas City and Pittsburgh. Still want to try to build a team with good defense, but I do feel that when people are hitting massive blasts and line drives all over the place, maybe it means over the course of a game, a player less for your infielders and a player or more for your outfielders. I'm sure there's stats that I could look at and figure that out. Some of you probably know the answer to that, but just one of the things I'm thinking about a little bit. Right now, we've got them to take 40% of Castillo's contract. We have to give up Sergio Evangelista, who is a solid starting pitcher / reliever for us. Good stamina, but he's a replacement level type pitcher. He is an Iron Man, which I like, but his movement of 55 is a little lower than a lot of the pitchers on the staff. We had some with good movement, which I think is important to try to avoid those homers to the best extent possible in Colorado. And then a lot of the guys that I have added or re-signed have good movement also. Right fielder McConnell Ferguson, okay prospect, looks like a 5th outfielder, not a good personality, the type of guy that I like to move on from. JP Okada, a second baseman, okay. Issue is he's an infielder who doesn't play very good defense, despite my thought that maybe you can get away with that a tiny bit more in Colorado. I generally going to want a defensive player in the infield that looks better than that. And then left fielder Jesus Nunez, another guy who's a very marginal prospect. So we're going to make an offer to them. We're going to try to get them to keep 50% of his contract. We'll go ahead and submit that offer and see what they think as we start trying to revamp this team a little bit. And Pittsburgh has gotten back to us, says we're almost there with the offer to have them retain 50% of his contract. They're looking for Moreno, who's a good starter. Malone, a good reliever. Minor league first baseman Brandon Hines, might trade him. Ruiz, who's a solid reliever for us. Contreras, a minor leaguer. Alex Ortiz, who's our backup catcher. Jose Gordillo, who we think might have a ton of promise. Ivan Mengetti, a solid reliever. Ramon Lopez, that could be somebody to trade. He's in Albuquerque and he's dealing with a torn flexor tendon in his elbow for 14 months. And then Nick Moore, a young lefty. Moore's got a good personality, was a first round pick in 2045. Don't want to get rid of him. Brandon Hines, 23-year-old minor league first baseman. Not a great personality. Only made it as high as AA. He's going to be 24 years old soon. Could certainly dump him in. Willie Contreras at least has a decent personality. And then Ramon Lopez, not a horrible pitcher. He's only made it to AA, and as I said, he's going to be out until the 2050 season at this point, but has a decent personality. Who knows what he's going to look like when he comes back, but I think I'll include Brandon Hines. Don't see him being a big-time prospect. As I said, almost 24 years old, hasn't made it above AA ball yet, and brings nothing defensively, and not a ton offensively. So let's discuss this. See if we can find Mr. Hines and maybe get a deal done. All right, we've added Hines into the deal. Says he'll try to give us a firm answer. He did say that that would get the deal done, so we will take him at his word. And a good piece of news here, Mike Madrigal, one of the contracts that were offered by the previous regime. He's unhappy with the money we've offered him, so that's great. We didn't want to have to back out on the contract, but we're hoping that we would be able to not sign him, hoping to get a similar report shortly from Izzy Huerta, the other guy that we have a outstanding offer to at this point. And Pittsburgh has accepted that trade offer. So we're going to bring on Juan Castillo. Pittsburgh's going to retain 50% of his contract. As I said, in a perfect world, he's a second baseman or a third baseman for us next year. But he at least gives us a competent defensive shortstop who is a competent bat if we do end up having to play him at short. And with Pittsburgh retaining 50% of his contract, you know, the number's going to be 6 this coming season, 7.5 the year after that, and then 9 the final year of his contract. And then we'd have a team option after that. So it's not going to be crippling money, certainly something that we could get out of if we needed to. But feel like at least that gives us another competent major league infielder. Not a great contract in retrospect. You know, we overpaid for him off of that big first season he had with us in Pittsburgh and hasn't performed up to that contract over these last 2 seasons. But at 50%, it feels a lot better, and definitely feels better for me that we're starting to at least add some competent major league players to our roster for next season. And the trade probably also worked out in terms of fan interest in selling tickets. They were a little disappointed. We moved on from Evangelista, but very excited that we brought Juan Castillo on board. So our fan interest is up to 77 right now. So I believe we were about 67 when we started about a month ago. So made some progress on that front, but certainly we'll be losing some free agents this offseason and probably not going to be incredibly active in the free agent market. Right now, going to just continue focusing on getting more and more scouting reports in, getting to know our team and the free agent market and the universe at large better and more accurately. And then hopefully we can continue to make some trades and peruse the free agent market on the margins as we get closer to the Rule 5. And one good piece of news is that our new manager, Nick Hartman, does view Juan Castillo as our starting shortstop. Previously, he had Frank De Los Santos in as our starting shortstop, who is not as good offensively and not as good defensively, although his error rating is higher. His range and his arm are much worse, and his turn double play rating is similar. I've switched Castillo's position to shortstop from third base. Again, he is not a perfect answer defensively for the long term, but he may end up being our shortstop next year. You may remember from our first episode that one of the things we really wanted to do was potentially trade away the veteran pitcher Andres Erezeri, who's got a big contract, and he's got a no trade clause by virtue of being a 5-10 guy. So Braves just made an offer to us for him. They're asking us to retain 90% of the contract. He is a guy who is a 4-time All-Star. Still a solid major league pitcher, 8-9 last year with a 4.20 ERA. If we only had to retain 10% of his contract, it's something that we would think about. But right now, he's one of only 2 lefties on our staff. We've got one in the rotation and one in the bullpen. And given that we've kind of cleared out salary via other means, not gonna just dump him unless we get a good offer. He's also extremely popular locally, so the fans wouldn't be happy if we moved on from him. But although moving on from him was one of the first things we wanted to try to do when we took over this team, with the other moves that we've made now, the urgency behind that is lower than it was. So again, if the Braves had only asked us to retain 10 or 20% of his contract, we'd seriously entertain it. But if we're going to be paying most of his contract and losing him and basically getting a meh outfield prospect in return, not the type of deal that we're going to do. And I could use some help here from listeners, viewers, watchers, however you consume this. As I mentioned, we've got the Rule 5 draft coming up a month from today exactly. I right now have very limited knowledge through my scouts of the player universe. So I'm trying to figure out a effective way to kind of get the universe of, well, not even free agents that we're talking about, but just players down to those who could be Rule 5 eligible. And I don't see an obvious tab for it. Even when I go to the players screen and find a player, don't see an obvious way in a search there. I think what I'm going to do is kind of go through team by team, on their organization page and look for Rule 5 eligible players. And although our scouting right now is horrible, if I see Rule 5 eligible players with like 4 or 5 star potential on each team, even maybe 3-star potential, honestly, I'm going to try to just pick those out, going through all 29 teams one by one, pick out a handful of players that might be interesting and start scouting them. Obviously, some of them could get put onto the 40-man roster ahead of the Rule 5 draft. And obviously, my scouting right now is not real good, so I could think that somebody's a 4-star player, and after we scout them a little deeper, find out that the person's a total dud. If there's a better way to do this, let me know. I can't think of one, but I could definitely be missing something. And the way that I suggested doing it was actually not as painful as I feared. It's literally only been 5 minutes, and I was able to go through all 29 teams, just kind of quickly click on the top 3-5 prospects who might be Rule 5 eligible on each team, and kind of put a scouting task list together. So we're very busy at this point with some of the free agents, some of the players in our system, and then a lot of the prospects that we are now looking at. And you can see some of them are 3 to 4 weeks out, questionable whether we'll get them back. So we're not going to have a great view of the Rule 5 draft, because with a lot of these players also, just being honest, our assessment of them is pretty weak at this point anyways. For example, you look at Marvin Munoz, a guy that we're scouting out of the Red Sox system. Our scouting accuracy on him is very low. 2 weeks from now, it'll come back and it'll probably be kind of low or medium. So the fact that we are dealing with a brand new scout and the fact that we are dealing with a scouting budget that is lower than I would like is not an ideal situation right now, but all the more reason to not make any huge rash moves this offseason. Focus on players that we know from Pittsburgh. Focus on players a month or 2 or 3 months down the line once we have good scouting reports that happen to still be available. But we're not going to, make a $25 million year decision on faulty information. So not going to pursue anything on that front. And obviously we don't have the money in our budget to make a $25 million decision right now anyways. And more good news, Izzy Huerta has rejected the offer that we made, or actually that the previous regime made to him also. So that is good news. Huerta wants more dollars. We're not going to give it to him. Madrigal wants more dollars. We're not going to give it to him. So that should help us out in terms of eventually opening up some more money for us to spend on free agents, since those contracts are going to fall through. All right, we're at the start of the winter meetings. I believe we were going to be picking around 14th or 15th. Let's see the results from the draft lottery. Doesn't look like we moved up, not surprising. Also, it's going to be getting close to time for us to finalize our ticket pricing, given that one of ownership's goals is that we increase attendance from about 29,000 to about 36,000. I think we are going to stick with our initial reaction, which was to cut ticket prices a bit. You can see we had tons of empty capacity out in Colorado last year. Do worry that we're not going to sell that many more tickets with a poor team on the field, and that revenue per game could take a hit. But we'll see how many tickets we can sell at $26. Season tickets we can sell at $26, and then we can kind of react from there after that. So I don't think I'm going to make any changes there. Have started getting some of the scouting reports back on some of the free agent pitchers that are out there, free agent players in general that are out there. Did get one back on our former friend Henry Gonzalez. View him as a 2.5-star kind of player. His demand had been $10.5 million. Like, it was $5.5 million a week ago. Then it was $10.5 million when I looked a few days ago. Now it's down to $5.5 million. There was no way I was going to pay him $10 million a year. If we can get him for something much less, I don't even know about much less, but somewhat less than $5.5 million, I would consider bringing him on board just as a reclamation project. You can see we're not giving him nearly what he wants. We're not going to guarantee him a spot in the starting lineup. He's looking for $5.5 million a year for 3 years. We're giving him an average of $4.5 million for 3 years with a team option on that final season and no promised role. Don't know what he'll think about it, but not all that concerned if he doesn't like it. He wants more money. So we'll let that linger out there. He may come back to us hat in hand in a month or so. I don't think there's going to be a ton of demand for him. Well, we made it to the Rule 5 draft. As you can see here, still trying to scout some of the players that we had picked out that might have been interesting. So we're going to have very incomplete information, unfortunately. 11th pick in the draft for the Rockies here. We'll do what we can. You can see scouting accuracy is only high on a couple of players, average on a lot. and still low on many when we're looking at the batters. You can see some of these guys are guys that we're still scouting. Taking a look at pitchers, similar situation. Got high accuracy on only a few, average. A lot of guys that we were still trying to scout. We started about a month ago, but again, we don't have a huge scouting budget. And the previous scouting budget was very light on scouting major league players and minor league players. And we've got a brand new scout on board who doesn't know a lot about anything, but is very good. So we'll improve it over time. Not optimal that our first year, when we can probably have the best opportunity to use someone in the Rule 5 draft as a real contributor to our team, and we're not going to have all the intel that we would like, but it is what it is at this point, and we'll make the best decisions we can with our scouts' guidance. Again, our scouting accuracy and our information is so weak that it's tough to take a real strong position. We'll see what is around when we get to our pick. Our scouting director recommends we go with Jordan Chun, a 26-year-old right-handed starting pitcher. Don't love the personality, don't love the horrible control. Obviously, incredible stuff. Incredible fastball, changeup, and splitter. Again, this is all with very low accuracy. Looking at the OSA, though, they have a similar view on him. The guy walked 112 batters in 121 innings in AAA last year. He is a ground ball pitcher with good movement, throws pretty hard, so there's an argument that he might be okay in Colorado, but guy who's walking almost a batter an inning in AAA just does not interest me in the least. So we're going to go in a different direction. And the pickings are actually kind of slim, and as we've talked about, we don't really know a lot about them, but I think we're going to take a flyer on Jose Brito, 26-year-old right fielder out of Mexico. Pretty versatile defensively, can play left, center, or right, can play first, second, third, or short. You don't want to be playing him at those infield positions, but he can. Really good personality. Looks like he might have a little bit above average power. Not going to strike out a ton. Combined last year have 12 home runs between AA and AAA. Hit 280 at the AAA level. Maybe he becomes a fifth outfielder or a utility player for us. Not all that exciting, but we are going to go ahead and draft Jose Brito here to bring a little more talent onto the team. And here in the second round, scouting director still obsessed with Jordan Chun. We're just not going to deal with that lack of control. And it's really slim pickings. Here in the second round, we're going to go with Seda, 27-year-old from Taiwan. Been playing independent league for the last several years. Has been dominant there. Maybe he makes the team as a fifth outfielder. We're just kind of throwing stuff against a wall at this point. There's really not a lot here in this draft, and not having good scouting doesn't help. So I think that's all we're going to do in the 2 rounds. We'll auto draft the rest of the way. Take a look at the draft log. Yeah, and it looks like generally people agreed with us. The Phillies and our Rockies were the only teams that even picked 2 players. Again, our scouting color was not that good, but didn't seem like there was a ton of talent available, unfortunately. But we got a infield / outfield prospect and a pure outfield prospect. Wouldn't shock me if one or both of them do make the 26-man roster, because we are somewhat bereft of talent, unfortunately. Well, we've simmed ahead into January now, getting a little bit better accuracy on a few of the players. Still thinking about scouting again, and our scouting again. Yoshitaro Nakahara, former Pittsburgh player, And we're also going to check back in with Henry Gonzalez, and you can see his demand is up to 10.6 million. It seems to fluctuate depending on the day between 5.5 and 10.5 million, but certainly unlikely that we're going to get anything done with him at the 4.5 kind of range that we'd like to be at. And we've simmed ahead a couple of days to the Hall of Fame voting results. Still going to check in on Bobby Witt Jr. Starting to think he's never going to make it to the Hall of Fame. He retired shortly before we finished our Kansas City run. We've done 11 years in Pittsburgh, and now we've moved on to Colorado. And yeah, he's fallen down the list, 52.8%. Only O'Neill Cruz elected to the Hall of Fame here in 2049. And we have gotten a new scouting report back on our old buddy Henry Gonzalez. Reasonably favorable, above average offensive player, patient at the plate, solid overall offensive contributor. Supposedly he's looking for $6 million now. Yeah, wants a 3-year deal, 18 million. Not willing to go there yet. So we'll move on or continue to avoid having a difficult conversation with him for the time being. And one of the things I mentioned that I felt like we needed was a left-handed arm for the bullpen. Doing just a very primitive search on anything that's out there with decent movement and acceptable stuff and control. Jordan Stallworth from the Rangers seems like the most reasonably priced acquisition. He's a 27-year-old, soon to be 28-year-old in a couple of weeks, who's already wrecked physically, but he's got a good personality, throws in the mid to high 90s, has good movement on his pitches, a little more effective against lefties than righties. Honestly, we just need any left-handed arm at this point. I don't love the fact that he is wrecked physically, but he's low priced. We're not making a long-term commitment to him, and we can get him for, I think, a reasonably decent price. Elijah Washington, who's a 20-year-old outfield prospect, 20-year-old infield prospect, but horrible in terms of playing the infield, can't really play the outfield either. And I don't think he's going to have enough of a bat to justify being a full-time DH. He was a second-round pick back in 2047. He's got no speed. Just not an exciting prospect from my perspective, and I do feel like we definitely need a left-handed bat. So I'm going to try to get more out of Texas than just Stallworth, or a left-handed arm. I'm going to try to get more out of Texas than just Stallworth in this trade, but right now we only have the one left-handed arm in the rotation in Irizarry and the one left-handed arm in the bullpen in Vargas, and feel like we definitely need more than that. And although we're thinking about a potential reunion with left-handed starter Bobby Gonzalez, who was with us for a long time in Pittsburgh, he would be more of a starter for us, perhaps a fifth starter. So think that we still would potentially need Stallworth for the bullpen. And we do have a deal done. We have to put in Giovesa Puttini, who is a non-prospect with a bad personality, so happy to just get him out of the minors. And we get back second baseman Arturo Barrios in return, a non-prospect with a good personality. So we're just kind of working on little step-by-step improving the kind of dynamics and the type of people and players we have in our minor league system, one little move at a time. But I think Stallworth will help us at the major league level, and the exchange of Puttini for Barrios gives us a little bit better influence on the real prospects in our minor league system. And you can see we've started making some progress with our scouting accuracy from Delgado, particularly on the free agents. And we do have very high scouting accuracy on Yoshitaro Nakahara now, who had that incredibly disappointing year for Pittsburgh last year. Still has the home run power, according to our scout, particularly against right-handed pitching. And he's wrecked physically. He's 35 years old, but a left-handed bat, Colorado Stadium, with good power for just $1.4 million. I think it's a gamble worth taking. We'll try to get him for a little less just because that's the way we roll. If you get 550 plate appearances, we'll give you a $150,000 bonus because there's no way you're going to stay healthy, and we're probably not going to be playing you against left-handed pitching, so that ain't going to happen. But that'll give you the opportunity to earn the full $1.4 million you were looking for. We're not going to guarantee you the starting lineup, though. Actually, we are. I think if he starts against righties, that should be fine. It's just a one-year deal. If he gets a little cranky, he gets a little cranky. He's willing to think about the offer. So maybe a little bit of a redemption tour for me with Uncle Nakahara if we're able to get a somewhat productive 300 at-bats out of him with the Rockies this year. You would think he would certainly put up better numbers in Colorado than he did in Pittsburgh. And another potential reunion that I've hinted at is going to be with starting pitcher Bobby Gonzalez, who had a long run with us in Pittsburgh, 38, soon to be 39-year-old lefty. But he is an Iron Man, ground ball pitcher, which probably helps in Colorado, decent movement. It could get ugly at this stage in his career, especially because he's basically a two-pitch pitcher with a mediocre sinker and a bad slider thrown in with his change and his curve. But he led the league in games started with the Yankees last year, led the league in BABIP, so he may have gotten a little bit lucky after a pretty unlucky 2047 with us. Basically, we're just looking for a back end of the rotation starter without a long commitment. He's looking for $6.8 million a year over 3 years with a player option. That ain't going to happen. We may give him a 2-year deal with a team option for the second year. And we've got money to potentially spend this year. So I don't mind giving him the $7 million that he's looking for this year. But the second year is going to be less if we bring him on board. The buyout would put it up to 7.5. Not going to give him the no trade clause. We do intend to use him as a starter. See what he thinks about 2 years, $12 million with a team option for the second year. I don't think he's got a lot else on the table, so he's going to think about it. So reuniting with a couple of veterans who had good moments for us, in the case of both of them, actually sometimes great moments in Pittsburgh. Bobby Gonzalez was there a lot longer than Nakahara was, but Nakahara was pretty productive in the 2047 season when we made our first run into the World Series. Not making long-term commitments to either of them, so those contracts don't really scare me. Ooh, and some really nice news here as we get to the start of the preseason. Charlie Monfort just boosted our budget from 186 to 200 million after seeing the way this offseason had gone. So that is really good. Gives us a ton of money to take on free agents if we want to. Again, we don't know the free agents that well. We're getting better, though, particularly when we look at Delgado rather than the OOTP Scouting Association. We're average on a lot of people now, getting very high, but we still have some low accuracies thrown in there. But we're getting a little more competent with our scouting, which is good. But even though we're not going to really chase after a lot of free agents, that gives us the opportunity to really crank up the development budget another notch, and also crank up the scouting a little bit more. So pleased with that. Player development, we've got enough put aside in the draft. We've got enough put aside in international amateur free agents that we should be fine there. So, used most of the money he just gave us to boost scouting and development budgets to pretty strong levels relative to the rest of the league, I'm sure. And we've got development now over that 30 million kind of threshold around which you start getting rapidly diminishing returns. So feel pretty good about that. Thank you, Mr. Monfort, for the additional money. We'll see whether you view the upgrade at catcher as appropriate when we get moving. Don't think we're going to play 500 ball. We're working on improving your attendance. You can see we are targeted to sell about 2,000 extra season tickets this year and ultimately still make a little bit more money, even though we did cut ticket prices dramatically. Obviously, a lot is going to depend on fan interest and how many people come out to watch us. The potential extension with Jamal Cohen is another thing maybe need to revisit here. Good power hitter for us. Can see the last 5 years, 32, 46, 29, 47, and 45 home runs. Some of that is Colorado. Some of that is his really good home run power. But he's 30 years old now, and he is looking for $20 million a year for 8 years. I just don't think that's a wise contract. I'd like to make Mr. Monfort happy, but it's going to have to be for lower dollars and a lot fewer years. And we are going to have some money for extensions next year. Cohen is a good offensive player. There's no doubt about it. He's proven he can hit at the major league level. He's proven he can hit in Colorado. Over the course of his career, 136 OPS plus, 128 WRC plus, a WAR of almost 28. He's got 308 home runs and 4,360 at-bats. Doesn't walk much and strikes out a ton, which I don't love. But he's a two-time All-Star. He's won a Silver Slugger, won a World Championship a few years back with the Rockies before they really started to implode. Again, he's not a 20, and he's good in the clubhouse too. Good leader, high intelligence, low greed, left-handed bat. He's not a $20.7 million a year player for 8 years into his late 30s by any stretch of the imagination, but we'd consider doing something shorter and less money. And this is probably not going to go well. He was looking for 8 years at $20.75 million. We're offering him 3 years at an average of $18 million. A little front-loaded with $20 million next year. Then a team option for us at $18 million with a $2 million buyout. And then a player option for him at $16 million the final year, which we would hope that he would probably opt out of, even if we kept him for the second year. So essentially it's a 1 year, $22 million contract if we decide that's what we want it to be. But we will get bonus points with Mr. Monfort if we're able to at least sign him to the extension. We did up the bonus for an MVP and an All-Star. Given that he's looking for so many years and so much money, I don't think this is going to fly, but we'll give it a try. He is willing to think about a 4-year deal, more money. Definitely don't want to make a long-term commitment to him. All right, we've got a deal here. We're giving him the 4 years that he wants. We're back to the 18 million average that we want. 2 years guaranteed at 20 million. Then he can opt out. If he doesn't opt out, though, that gives us a team option on the third year. And then he's also got a player option to opt out of the final year of the contract. So a lot of options in there. Don't know what he's going to think about it. No, he still wants a little more money and a little more security. I think we'll revisit things later. Maybe his price goes up, but we've got all season to kind of figure that out before we're going to get evaluated by ownership. So don't feel like we have to press that lever right this second. Other than that, we're still just waiting to hear back on the offers that we made to Bobby Gonzalez and Nakahara and see if we can maybe reunite with one or both of those players. And we just heard back from both Bobby Gonzalez and Yoshitaro Nakahara. Gonzalez looking for more money. Nakahara says that we've got the best offer out there to him, but he's going to take his time to think about things. So that's fine. I'm not going to push on either of those deals. Hopefully we get Nakahara signed. Who knows what's going to happen with Gonzalez. If we can't get him at our price, we can't get him at our price. It looks like, he claims that he wants $10.6 million. This is kind of reminiscent of last offseason where he came in looking for 9, 10, 11 million, and he ended up signing a one-year deal with the Yankees at close to 20 million. So he is good at working the system, but we don't have to allow him to work us. And did take a hit to fan interest with Javi Grullon, who we decided not to make an offer to in arbitration, moving on down to 75. So I think that was a 2-point hit. Not the end of the world, but probably got a couple more of those hits coming with players who are free agents off of the Rockies that we decided to move on from. And we have signed Yoshitaro Nakahara, so the redemption tour begins. We'll see if we can get a year more similar to what he did in Pittsburgh 2 seasons ago than what he did in Pittsburgh last year. But at $1.25 million, a one-year deal, not a lot of risk one way or the other for us. Even if he's hurt, even if he's ineffective, we're paying him like a fifth outfielder. Hopefully we can get, like I said, 300 productive at-bats out of him against right-handed pitching. And we're now getting close to the start of spring training, about a week and a half away. We've been doing kind of a deep dive on scouting most of our organization. You can see we've still got a lot of guys on the task list down in the lower levels of the organization. Want to make sure we have a good sense of what our talent actually looks like as we get closer to the start of the regular season. Still have both of the DSL teams to kind of get updated scouting reports from, so we're going to add those to the list because clearly we're going to be reorganizing this entire minor league organization when we're coming out of spring training. Still need to add a lot of talent to some of these teams, so we're going to make some offers now, and certainly probably another batch of offers in 3 or 4 weeks when we're getting close to the mid to end point of spring training and players get a little more desperate to be playing on a team somewhere this upcoming season. Still have not heard anything else back from Bobby Gonzalez. Don't think that he's going to probably get the money that he's looking for, but not sure that he's going to settle for the type of contract that we offered him either. So we've gone ahead and offered a bunch of minor league contracts to people who aren't looking for major league money at this point. Generally, guys with good personalities. Some of them could contribute at the major league level potentially, but honestly, it's just guys with good personalities to start filling out the upper and mid levels of our organization, where we are going to need some bodies and we're going to want some players who are going to be positive influences on the prospects around them and also hopefully help us win some games in the minor leagues. And we've made it to the start of spring training. Did sign a few more players who we have scattered around our minor league system. Obviously going to have to do a complete deep dive on that before the start of the season. But we are to the start of spring training, so we are going to call it an episode. Still waiting to hear back from Bobby Gonzalez. But we got Nakahara signed. We made the trade for Castillo, which should help us. Made the trade for Stallworth, which should help us. So we've gotten the infielder we wanted with Castillo. Gotten the outfielder we wanted with Nakahara. Gotten the left-handed reliever we wanted with Stallworth. and still kind of need to figure out whether we want to add another arm to the starting rotation or not. So we've got time to figure that out. We've got money to figure that out. Scouting and development budgets now locked in here at the start of spring training. Scouting up more than 100% from a year ago, and development closing in on being up 200% from where it was a year ago. So hopefully that will start paying dividends in terms of the number of international players we find and the way that we are able to hopefully develop them effectively in the years to come. So in our next episode, going to really kind of dig into what the roster actually looks like now. Invite several more players off of these other teams into spring training to see exactly what we have and don't have, and continue to, as we get further through spring training, peruse the free agent market for what's available and who we might be able to bring on board who could potentially help us either at the major league level or in the minor leagues. You can definitely see there's some players like Oscar Altamirano, the 32-year-old, who looks like he's got a captain personality and a pretty good personality. The perfect guy to sit in AA or AAA for us. So we're going to actually offer him a minor league contract while we're talking about it. Certain there will be more players than that going forward. You can see the demand for Henry Gonzalez is coming down to $4.8 million. Isn't much different than we offered him a while back. I think we offered him an average of $4.5 million. $4.7 million over 1 year. If we can put in a deal with a bunch of options, or at least a couple options, wouldn't mind bringing him on board just for a little competition in the outfield, particularly because we probably are going to be moving on from our most expensive outfielder after this year, not renewing his contract. So although Gonzalez would probably be a fourth or fifth outfielder this year, if he plays well, he could play himself into a more significant role, but don't want to make a huge monetary commitment, don't want to make a huge time commitment, want to keep a lot of options for us in whatever we decide to do. And Gonzalez was looking for $4.7 million over 1 year. Our previous offer to him was 3 years at $4.5 million. Now we're offering him 4 years at $4.5 million, but $6 million this upcoming year, followed by $4 million each of the next 3 years, and team options for us on the third and fourth years of that. Don't know that he'll go for it, but he certainly doesn't seem to be a player where there's a lot of demand right now, so I would hope he'd at least consider it. No, he just wants a 1 year deal. I don't think that's going to work for us. We want a little bit of optionality in case things do work out. Oh, and he's also been asking for a promised starting lineup role, which we're not giving him, which doesn't help. But now we're giving him 3 years and an average of $5 million a year. Just the last 2 years are team options, 6 this year, 5 next year, 4 the year after that. So I'd say it's a pretty responsible contract. We've got money to spend this year. He wants $5.3 million, only 1 year. We're not going to do it unless we get a second year option out of him. He's looking for 1 year at 5.3. We're looking for 2 years at an average of 5.4, with $6 million guaranteed this year, and then a potentially 4.8 next year. If he doesn't go for this, we will move on. No. He's starting to think that there's a lot more demand for him than I think there really is. So wasted a little bit of time re-engaging with Mr. Gonzalez. Wish you good luck in your career, Henry. Sorry we couldn't come together with something that works. So with that, we're going to conclude the episode. As I mentioned, I kind of outlined the plan for spring training, continue bringing on some minor league free agents, continue looking for players for that, like Gonzalez, but not Gonzalez, who might be able to help us at the major league level, either Henry or Bobby Gonzalez, as I think about it. and then kind of get a real good sense of what the roster looks like, add some more players onto the spring roster for us, and hopefully remain relatively healthy and make some decisions on what the 26-man roster should look like coming out of spring training in our next episode. Until then, thank you so much for watching and hope you have a great day.